Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we see that things are going from bad to worse for those who were very early and ardent supporters of the 45th President of these United States of America, Donald J. Trump. And the reason that I say this is we see that he's come forth and engaged in what can only be called a deal with the devil with respect to keeping the deferred action against children of illegal aliens, or, as it's more commonly referred to in the American vernacular, that of DACA. He has reached a deal with Chuck the Schmuck Schumer and Nasty Pelosi, in which he will basically grant amnesty to these people, or at least that's how it is appearing at the moment. Of course, one of the first people that came out in ardent, almost rabid support, throwing her weight, what little of it there is, behind him in that disastrous debacle and fiasco known as the 2016 presidential election cycle, little orphan Annie Yap Yap Toto Coulter the Floozy, is now saying that, is there anybody who doesn't want to impeach him now? Well, Annie, little Annie, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, attempted to warn you throughout the course of exactly 2 years that this man was not who he claimed to be, that he had his own ulterior motives behind all of this, that he was working towards his goals come hell or high water, irrespective of whom it harmed or what damage that it caused to the conservative movement, philosophy, and political ideology. You see, this is part of the problem with the modern arena of American politics. We have essentially allowed our system of polity to break down into a mere spectator sporting event. It's rah-rah, shish-kumbah, pom-pom waving for our guy, so long as it is our guy, and we can make any excuse that is humanly imaginable. However, there does reach a point in time when it becomes a bit too much to bear. It's as though we've bitten off a bit more than we could chew. That is what is happening with some of the acolytes for Donald Trump. And it just goes along the line of what has been happening ever since he secured the reins of political power in the land of the free and the home of the brave, dating back to January of 2017. He has not kept up with much of any of the promises. Who can forget that one of the greatest platitudes of his throughout the course of the entire election cycle was that of building a wall and making Mexico pay for it? Where is that? He's already agreed in this deal with the devil that he made with Mistress Nasty Pelosi and the bumbling New York buffoon Chuck the Schmuck Schumer that there will be no funding for the wall. Now, isn't it interesting that when he first said that he was softening his position when it came to the issue of that crisis of the torrent and flood of illegal aliens that are pouring across our porous southern border, he was softening his position after he had a meeting there with the president of Mexico. And then he came back and he held that rally at Phoenix, Arizona, in which all of a sudden his tune changed 100%. It was the same usual stuff. We're going to build a wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it, and rah-rah, shish, kumbah, wave your pom-poms. But it's not coming to fruition. Just as my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have warned, just as our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, has warned, the man was not being honest. He is a carnival barker and a con artist of epic and biblical proportions. It's something that we simply cannot afford to ignore, yet so many in his group of core supporters simply refused to listen to reality. They had convinced themselves that he was going to be some sort of a messianic figure that would change the muck and moreau that has gripped this nation's capital over there at Washington, D.C. Yet again, where is the draining of the swamp? Where is all of the promised changes? They're just simply nowhere to be found, because it was never his modus operandi or goal or end game to change these things. He was merely saying what he had to say at any given time to any given audience to get the votes that he needed in order to secure a vice-like grip on the reins of political power. You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is part of the reason why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, throughout the course of the past exact 2 years, have been attempting to warn you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, that what we need to do, and the only litmus test that matters when vetting prospective candidates for any higher elected office, or indeed any elected office for that matter, is to apply the Constitution. Are they going to follow the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution, or are they going to make populist-style promises? Now, I remember quite a while back now, I had done a solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program examining this whole notion of populism and whether populism has ever been a good thing for the American system of polity. And basically, the conclusion that we can reach, examining the great weight of the evidence under the totality of the circumstances and with a modicum of objectivity, is that populism has never been beneficial for these United States of America. There's simply no way around what should be an open and obvious as well as self-evident truth. Yet, so many people are just sick and tired of politics as usual in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and who can blame them? We're all sick and tired of the broken promises. We're all sick and tired of the great litany of lies that have been pulled out in election cycle after successive election cycle for generation after successive generation. However, that is not what is changing here. It was not even in the works for it to be changed. Instead, we have been bamboozled, hoodwinked, and lied to. And yet, the spin doctors continue to engage in this Orwellian dance. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, there really is no more apt a way to describe what is unfurling before the shocked and horrified eyes of the nation than an Orwellian song and dance here. Some are already going so far out to claim such outlandish things as General Kelly must be brainwashing Trump by feeding him drugs in his drinks. That's what the fish people supporting Alex Jones, the nutbag, had to say on one of his recent shows. And then, of course, we have little orphan Annie, Yap Toto Coulter the floozy out there saying that what's a dreamer? Someone who votes for Trump expecting immigration to be reformed and yet is lied to. Well, Annie, it's good that you are starting to wake up. A little bit too little too late, but better late than never, I guess. But here's the thing. All you had to do was go back and look at some of the past positions he had held before he decided to officially throw his quaff into the ring back in July of 2015. And of course, we here at this state-of-the-art radio program have been warning, dating back to our premiere episode, which aired 2 years ago on September 11th of 2015, that Trump would not stay true to the vast litany and array of promises that he was making while stump-thumping in front of the cameras for the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. He never really had any intent to do so. Why? Because he's an image maker. If you look at his business, what is it that he is known for? Besides failed businesses, it's reality television. Most people know him because of his years-long appearances on The Apprentice, and they love the thought of "you're fired." Well, certainly, the musical chairs with respect to various cabinet positions within this 45th administration of these United States of America has been nothing short of chaotic. But is chaos what we really need? Is chaos what was promised on the campaign trail? Think back to it. One of the strongest, most stringent promises that Donald Trump made while he was on the campaign trail was that on his very first day, in fact, within the first several hours that he would be president of the United States, that DACA would be repealed and they'd be sent back, and healthcare would be, Obamacare would be repealed, and then, of course, he added place, and then it became, we need to pay for everybody, and that's where we find ourselves. The promises that were made, time and again, almost to the point of it reaching ad nauseum, were just a bunch of bunk. It was just saying whatever he felt he had to say in order to ensure that his base would not abandon him at that given point in time. And remember that one of the great litany of choruses that came up from the most ardent supporters of the 45th president of these United States of America at the time of that disastrous debacle and fiasco known as the 2016 presidential election was that we like him because he's an outsider. He's not a political activist, one who has been deeply entrenched within the swamp that is Washington, D.C. Okay, all right. That's the line and narrative that you're going to go with, but how is that playing out? How is that being beneficial? The fact of the matter is, it is not. And of course, as we have warned, not to toot our own horns here, but you have to realize that we have been among one of the first voices throughout this entire soap opera that went out on a limb to say that, look, this guy is certainly not the man which he professes to be. It went unheeded. Oh, we didn't know what we were talking about. Or, yeah, but Hillary. And there's still, in various avenues of social media and channels of social media, attempting to drag out the dead horse of Hillary Clinton. Look, we're well past 100 days. And the chorus of, well, he needs 100 days, that's gone. At what point will people finally begin to admit that the man was simply lying and had been lying all along? Of course, there's going to be egg on the face of so many within the so-called right-wing punditry and commensurate, people like Lush Bimbo Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, and yes, even, Alex the Fish People Jones there. He's going to have to admit that, hey, maybe, just maybe, it was a bad idea to support this guy. But they're not going to do that. Because in a way, this profession, this line of work of pontificating about political happenings within the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave is something that requires that you have a reputation. And as the old adage goes, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and only a split second for that reputation to be torn asunder. And that is certainly what has been coming into fruition for people like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. Look at how it's decimated Fox News. with essentially the establishment of a culture of corruption. And yes, my heart goes out to Eric Bolling with the loss of his son. But, again, we see that this plays out in a way that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been attempting to warn over the course of exactly 2 years. That this is something we cannot ignore. It's something that we cannot allow to just play forth without there being some sort of accountability. Because if you recall, one of the things that I know I have oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of our state-of-the-art radio program is the wise and sagacious advice of that great founding father, Samuel Adams, that in order for these United States of America to be a strong, vibrant, and, dare I say, robust republic, it is absolutely critical and vital that the American people be a virtuous people. In other words, that we have a high standard of morality, that we can clearly differentiate and distinguish between that which is certainly right and that which is certainly wrong. But that's something that we've been getting away from. Step by step, increment by increment, we have been slowly getting away from that. Slowly embracing on both sides of the political aisle the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism. Situational morality, or allowing something to continue just because the guy who is doing it has your political affiliate party's letter after his or her name, that is chicanery. That is being hip with hypocrisy. And again, as we have warned so many times, it is something that will come back to bite us. It is something that we can ill afford to allow to come to fruition in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. Yet here we are today. We find ourselves in this untenable as well as unsustainable situation and scenario, and unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. We find that the same suspect characters are running around engaging in all sorts of chicanery. Now, of course, with the ouster of puppet master Stephen Bannon, people are saying, look, Bannon's back at his prominent perch at Breitbart News, and he is attempting to primary out people that were establishment hacks in the Republican Party. No, it's not what he's engaging in. This was political kabuki theater, and it still is political kabuki theater at its absolute worst. This is all designed to be obfuscation of the truth, a distraction, once again to use the tried and true, albeit threadbare tactic and strategy of divide and conquer against the conservative movement within these United States of America, and it is working to their plan. These are Alinsky tactics. Remember, Saul Alinsky was that frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist that wrote the Fabian Bible of rules for radicals. And essentially what they try and do is to concentrate and personalize each and every aspect of their political opponents so that people just think that they are radical, rabid fanatics who can be disregarded or ignored wholeheartedly. Or they go and say that they are so corrupt. Think back to the way that nasty Pelosi, the Democratic minority leader in the House of Representatives, the one that Donald J. Trump just had that meeting with to essentially throw under the bus this entire campaign promise, which hinged on much of the popular support that he had managed to garner within the rank and file of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. She said that it's the culture of corruption, allowing the Democrat Party to project its own foibles and shortcomings onto the Republican Party in an intellectually disingenuous fashion. But, you see, we lose the moral high ground when we do not stand for a virtuous platform, when we do not perform or operate as a virtuous people. Again, this is exactly the reason why Sam Adams warned us not to turn away from that. Of course, it also brings us back to that sagacious advice of that of the father of our nation, George Washington, who, in his farewell address of 1796, attempted to warn the American people not to allow themselves to break down into disparate and competing factions because we would lose sight of the overarching picture that truly matters. And what he meant by that was the supreme law of the land, our shared United States Constitution. Again, these are things we cannot afford to ignore, yet we have allowed ourselves to ignore it because we have become so intoxicated by the seduction of victory at all costs. But victory at all costs means doing deals with the devil. And we see that what Trump is doing is not even necessarily negotiating as the bigly, greatly negotiator that he claimed to be in his magnum opus, if it can even be called that, of the art of the steal, or is that the art of the squeal, or is it the art of the deal? I forget which, but at this point, what difference does it make anyway? He was not there to negotiate. It shows that he can be easily swayed, easily moved. Why? Because he doesn't have any core convictions or principles. And again, this was all readily apparent if someone took the time to examine his past statements throughout the course of the past 4 decades that he's been within the public limelight. It's not as though this is rocket surgery. You don't need Dr. Ben, I'm a victim Carson, get me a new suit to figure this out. Unfortunately, people just wanted to allow themselves to be convinced that their man, their guy, could simply do no wrong. Come hell or high water, he must always be right, and if you disagree with him, then you are obviously a communist or someone who doesn't give a damn about the United States of America, when in fact, nothing, and I truly mean absolutely nothing, could be further from the truth. Unfortunately, this is the charade that continues to play out in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, as I sit here speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. I wish that I had words of comfort and solace to convey with regards to this, but no such words of comfort or solace arise to the surface. And you know, with people like Ann Coulter, who went so far as to go out and entitle her book, In Trump We Trust, completely and unabashedly deifying this man, to now all of a sudden wake up to reality when the facts and evidence were there all along, it just speaks to how they are easily manipulated. That they are truly, deep down in their heart of hearts, a weak-minded individual. And I'm not saying this to be slanderous or to defame them, I'm just stating an opinion based off of as objective of an examination of the totality of the circumstances as I can provide. You see, conservatives have to be leery of the fact that there is a movement on either side of the political spectrum which is designed to operate against us. There's been an attempt to hostilely take over the party. And some of the so-called establishment tried to feign as though they wouldn't go along with Trump, or they feigned anger, this faux outrage. What that all amounts to is they are simply upset that it is not they themselves in their individual capacity who is being the standard bearer of this new age malarkey, this new age type of populist nationalism that clearly has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of these United States of America. And folks, I'm not again saying that to be overly harsh or critical. These are just the facts as I see them, examining this as I have been. So, what do we do to overcome this? Is it even possible to overcome this? Well, it's as we have always said here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. In order to overcome this, it is our duty, obligation, but above all, responsibility in our capacity as United States citizens to foster a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable rights which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. But again, I fully realize that this is far easier said than done, particularly given the fast-paced, rapid, modern society and culture that we live today. We are constantly connected, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, with our smartphones and whatever. We're always there with a plethora of information, and certainly there has been those who would play fast and loose with the truth, and the reason that they do that is they have their own ulterior motives and propagandist narrative and agenda to attempt to foist down the throats of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people. And why do they do this? Because it's all about power. Everything comes down to power. That is what they go for. Power, manipulation, corruption, but control. The deal with the devil that we saw unfurl before our very eyes was just Donald Trump re-embracing the true colors and the true political beliefs that he has held throughout the vast majority of his adult life. These are things that can't be ignored. These are the things that we, here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been attempting to warn you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members about throughout the course of the past exact 2 years. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, it shows no signs of improving. But Ann Coulter's magic shift away from everything that she had taken to be the main thing that she wanted to do has been taken from her, has been completely stripped from her. It's amazing to see that that is the case, because it's an ugly reality. And it comes down to the fact that she allowed her emotions to dictate her logic. And that is something that we attempted to warn her about for all this time. But she doesn't care. She never did care. It's not about reality for her. It's about being whatever feels good at the moment. Sort of that same nonsense that we have seen come to the surface time and again with respect to her. Annie, again, we told you so. This is something you should have seen coming. It was something that was right there in the woodwork, clear as day, if you were willing to take a step back and divorce yourself from your emotions and look at this in a critical and objective fashion. Unfortunately, that's something you chose not to do. And again, it goes back to being too little, too late. That's where we are. That's where the critical problems are. But it's not just Little Orphan Annie Yap Yap Toto Coulter the Floozy. It's Alex Jones, too. Remember, I said that he was out there basically lamenting all of this, saying that he believed that General Kelly was lacing Trump's water with some sort of psychotic drug or LSD or something of the sort of that. Maybe he saw him swimming or skinny dipping with the fish people. I don't know. All of it is beyond bizarre to me. It goes to a strain that is dangerous. Remember that one of the things that my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I have been warning about throughout the course of all this time is the danger of attempting to just fall in line and accept without any question whatsoever any and every conspiracy theory that comes to the forefront. It's making us look as though look like we are nothing but a bunch of unhinged kooks, that we are out of our mind. And again, none of that plays out well to the benefit of the conservative political movement, philosophy, and ideology. Rather, it gives the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists even more arrows in their quiver to use against us in their incessant and meticulous rampage and onslaught against us. Yet, ladies and gentlemen, again, this is something we cannot afford to allow to come to fruition. It's something that we cannot bow down to and accept with carte blanche. To sit there and say that he's drugged? How can you justify that? There really isn't a way to justify it. But this is just par for the course with all that is happening right now. And it's interesting to note that one of the things that Donald Trump has done here, and bear with me, folks, I'm going to create a new scene here so that I can do the video. He's already come out and essentially said that he's going to change the things that Pelosi was attempting to say about him, which, of course, is just ludicrous nonsense. And I don't know why the color... There we go. That's better. And it's just something you can't ignore. But I'm going to go ahead and pull this up so we can hear it, because it's kind of crazy when you stop and think about it. Everything that he was saying. He's saying that he's going to, we're not looking at amnesty, we're looking at allowing people to stay here. Wait a minute, we're going to have to really delve into that just a little bit, but here we go. Here's Dear Sweet Donaldo. Let's get this up and playing.
Happening on the ground right now in Florida. All right, let's listen to the president right now.
It doesn't have to be here, but they can't obstruct the wall, whether it's in a budget or something else, when we're ready for
open to citizenship for Dreamers over time?
No, we're not looking at citizenship. We're not looking at amnesty. We're looking at allowing people to stay here. We're working with everybody, Republican. We're working with Democrat. I just spoke with Paul Ryan. He's on board. Everybody's on board. They want to do something. We're not talking about amnesty. We're talking about taking care of people that were brought here, people that have done a good job and were not brought here of their own volition. But very importantly, what we want, we have to have a wall. If the wall is going to be obstructed, when we need the funds at a little bit later date, we'll be determining how much we need. Then we're not doing anything.
Right, what do you say, Mr. President, to Steve King, who says that your promises can't be believed? And what do you say to Senator Charles Grassley, who said you undercut what he's doing in the Judiciary Committee by talking with Pelosi and Schumer last night about all that?
No, what we're doing is we're doing it in conjunction with the Republicans. We have a very, very good relationship with a lot of people. A lot of people want this to happen. They expect it to happen. And we'll see if it happens. But we'll only do it if we get extreme security, if we get not only surveillance, but everything that goes along with.
Except that that's not what he did. Except that when he came out of that meeting, it has been admitted by the Democrats who were there and who he had met with that there won't be any funding for the border wall. Ergo, there won't be any security. Therefore, everything that he was just saying there was nothing short of a fraudulent lie. And again, to try and go out and proclaim that that is an amnesty is being intellectually disingenuous at best. Because what is amnesty other than to provide clemency from the full force and weight of the law applying to you? You see, this is the sort of chicanery and nonsense that goes on to undermine everything that his supporters wanted. In other words, he is doing a complete turnaround. He is doing a 360 on everything, and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do because what he has done is essentially undercut every position that they were adamant about. And that explains why little orphan Annie Yap Yap Toto Coulter, the floozy Coulter, went so far as to say that she, that At this point, who doesn't want to impeach him? Well, what this all comes down to, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that the man has no principles. He has no fundamental core set of beliefs, and that he's ready, willing, and able to say whatever he feels that he needs to say at any given juncture in time that gets him whatever type of political advancement he needs. But does that really play out in the best interest of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty? In this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people of these United States of America? I'm going to go out on a limb here, ladies and gentlemen, and say in no uncertain terms that it does not. That all of this has been a problematic attribute of this chaotic regime. Because, let's face it, when you lie to the American people in a continuous fashion, in an undeniable pattern, as has been the case right here and right now, then you are being chaotic. You are not living up to your promises. And once again, conservatives find themselves being lied to by their so-called elected representatives and officials. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, throughout the course of the past exact 2 years have been attempting to warn you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, that this was exactly what was going to befall us if we did not properly vet our candidates. Well, did we properly vet our candidates? You heard the clip. You heard it from the president's mouth himself. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. This is the real danger that we have been warning you about. And it's not something that's going to change. It's not something that he is serious about, nor was he ever. And that's the thing. Back on September 13th, over there at the Wright Scoop, they pointed out from an Associated Press briefing that Schumer and Pelosi announced a deal with Trump to protect young, they say immigrants, we'll call them by their proper term, that of illegal aliens. It will include security but no wall. Now, if you remember, what Trump had just been saying in that clip that I just played, it was that he wouldn't do it without a wall. That the wall was one of the promises that he was adamant about, and they would not move away from it. Well, bumpkus. What we see right there is that he is the political opportunist, just as he was the business opportunist when he was in the private sector. Again, people like that, and of that character and caliber, do not simply change their political stripes overnight, as Donald Trump would have us believe. And it's staggering. Pelosi and Schumer on deal with President Trump. Both sides have agreed to immigration reform package and border security, excluding the wall. So, how is it that we find ourselves in this rather peculiar situation and scenario in which we don't get anything of what we wanted? And how is it that Trump's acolytes and surrogates can defend him? Let's ask the question to the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. He's the one that really was against amnesty. He's the one that went out during the height of the 2016 presidential election cycle and said that the reason that he was supporting Donald J. Trump was because he had helped write his immigration policy and scheme. Well, it appears that Trump is not adhering to it, just as Trump hasn't adhered to any other blessed campaign promise that he made on the trail. You know, ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly the reason why Jeremy and I went so far as to name the 2016 presidential election cycle, and indeed the year 2016 in general, as that of betrayal. We're beginning to see who has been completely complicit in this ideology and in this selling out of conservative principles. Ladies and gentlemen, this is something you can't ignore. This is something that is there, clear as day to be seen. And yet, there are still those who, beyond a shadow of the doubt, are firmly convinced that Donald J. Trump has not abandoned things. As it is, Sean Hannity has gone out there and said that this is all part of the deep state. What deep state is this other than the deep state of excrement that you find yourselves in right now, Sean and Alex Jones and little orphan Annie? Maybe, just maybe, if you had listened, would not find yourself being branded as hypocrite. Unfortunately, you decided not to listen. Unfortunately, you are hypocrites, and that is currently where we find ourselves, and unfortunately, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. When you sell out your principles, and when you don't stand for a damn thing, this is going to be the end result each and every time. And there's no escaping that. Little orphan Annie Yap Yap Toto Coulter the Floozy. I remember when this first started happening, when he first started saying that he was going to soften on his illegal alien stance, said that we just voted for him, you can't hold us accountable. Well, therein lies the problem, Annie. Accountability is a central as well as critical pillar of who we are, both as a nation and people. Remember, I've oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of our state-of-the-art radio program that the two fundamental pillars of American culture are that of self-accountability and self-responsibility working in tandem, thereby delivering unto us self-determination. And most certainly, the American people are always doing their best and are always at their best when they can be self-determinate. But this isn't allowing us to be self-determinate. This is something that is working to our great detriment each and every time. Again, it's something that cannot be ignored. Nevertheless, they're going to try everything to spin this and obfuscate the truth. That's why Sean Hannity went forth and tried to talk about this as being the deep state. No, Sean, that little excuse is wearing extremely threadbare and thin at this current juncture in time. It's not something that I can accept, and I have a feeling that it's not something that the vast majority of our cherished listening passengers and audience members are willing to accept either. It's nonsense. It is a load of bovine and equine excrement of the highest order and degree, and it will not be tolerated in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave any longer. This is the same type of betrayal that made people turn to Donald J. Trump in the first place. But wannabe potentates and strongmen do not make good leaders. I'm sorry. You just look at the great weight of the evidence under the totality of the circumstances and in an objective fashion, and what other inexorable conclusion could sane, rational, and logical thinking human beings reach? To my mind, there is no other explanation that is adequate, or that even comes remotely close to explaining what it is that we see unfurling within the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave at this current juncture in time. Essentially, everything that we have warned you about going over the course of the past 2 years is playing out in near prophetic fashion. Donald Trump is once again showing us that he is not the man that he claimed to be, that he was never the one that he was wanting us to believe. And why? Well, he's always been about himself and only himself. That's the only thing that's ever crossed his mind. It's the only thing that will ever cross his mind. And that's not something that's going to change. But it's certainly making things very uncomfortable for those who went out on a limb to support him. It's certainly making them having to stop and second guess themselves, because it is more and more, with each successive passing day, appearing as though they have made a serious error in judgment. And that is what this is. It is a serious error or lapse in judgment, one in which they cannot escape. So, why is it this comes to the forefront? Well, it's because it's not just with Amnesty either. The Wright Scoop also points out that Trump is going to meet with Nancy and Chuck on tax reform. Why in the hell would he want to meet with the opposition's leadership? Well, again, as we have warned throughout the course of these past 2 years, throughout the vast majority of his adult life, Donald Trump has been a frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist leftist progressive with no attachment to the conservative political movement, philosophy, or even ideology. And again, we are seeing the hostile takeover and the forced transformation of the conservative movement unfurl before our shocked and horrified eyes. Again, it's something that we can't escape. Again, it's something that is there, clear as day, for anyone who is not suffering from acute ostrich syndrome, meaning that they are shoving their head up their posterior as opposed to the sand, could see. But so many still just don't want to see it. So many still just do not want to acknowledge that this is the truth, that it is self-evident, that it is clear as day for you to see. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't say this as a way to boost or buoy ourselves up. We say this out of a true, deep, and honest sense of concern for this, our beloved, constitutionally endowed Federalist Representative Republic. DACA, it appears, was just the first step in Trump's new bipartisan effort of betrayal. Now he's trying to get Nancy and Chuck's input on tax reform, according to the Wright Scoop, to try and get Democrat support for it. According to the Washington Times, President Trump will host Congress's Democratic leaders at a White House dinner Wednesday as he continues to seek bipartisan buy-in for tax reform and other priorities. The White House added the president's dinner with Senate Minority Leader Charles E. Schumer and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi to a schedule that already included bipartisan meetings to cultivate support for tax reform. The president has been looking to make more deals with Mr. Schumer and Ms. Pelosi after they struck a deal on the debt limit and spending last week. Mr. Trump was already scheduled to meet with more than a dozen lawmakers from both parties Wednesday afternoon. It's a part of an aggressive push by Mr. Trump to pass tax reform. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I don't believe that any type of tax reform that we could get out of these people would be beneficial, nor would it be the type of tax reform that we would want. But Trump, being an image-centric president that he is, and egocentric person that he is, he will count any type of successful quote-unquote reform movement as a success. You see, he's so afraid of failing. He's so afraid of being called a failure because that means that he would be called a loser. Remember, the whole line was, we're going to be winning. There's going to be so much winning that you're going to get sick and tired of winning. Well, if this is the type of winning, count me out. I want to have no part in it whatsoever. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what people didn't want to hear from us. It's exactly what we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been attempting to warn you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, of throughout the course of the past 2 years. Again, These are things we can't ignore. These are the things that keep rising to the surface time and time again. Why is it that he is seeking this sort of bipartisan nonsense? Well, the reason for that comes from what he has always been. He has always been one of those that seeks to carry on his own agenda. Come hell or high water, it doesn't matter what anyone else says or thinks. All that matters is with him. And here's the funny thing. Question is, will this ruin the Republican chances in those 2018 congressional midterm elections that are looming right around the corner? Again, I can't see a way that it won't have a detrimental impact on the conservative movement, and this is why Trump is pushing. And it gets worse. It gets worse. Apparently, given that he was unable to repeal Obamacare, Trump has changed his tune on that as well, looking rather to fix Obamacare than to repeal and replace. But it should have just been outright overturning first and foremost, as the Republican Party or gutless opposition party or GOP had been promising in election cycle after successive election cycle. But again, this is all about betrayal. This is the reason why my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I named 2016 and the election cycle that of betrayal. But Patarico over there at Red State put out a report, Trump considering fixing rather than repealing Obamacare. And he starts off by quoting The Hill. President Trump was open to the idea of a bipartisan Obamacare stabilization bill, but did not make any commitments during a meeting Wednesday with a group of House lawmakers, attendees said. So, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that we can see right there is that is part of those litany of so-called bipartisan meetings that the 45th president of these United States of America was engaged in at the time. And, to my mind, that's still not achieving or accomplishing anything that is within the best interest of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in these United States of America, we the people. It goes on to say that the bipartisan group of lawmakers, known as the Problem Solvers, pitched Trump on their plan to stabilize Obamacare markets. Now, the Problem Solvers, that's not exactly something that has me filled with warm, fuzzy sensations deep down within my heart of hearts. Rather, this is more of the same. This is more of the betrayal that we have been attempting to warn you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, about throughout the exact course of 2 years. But it goes on. He was clearly open to it. Intrigued, said Representative Josh Gottheimer, Democrat, New Jersey, a co-chair of the group. Ladies and gentlemen, how do we get past this? This is certainly the betrayal and worst-case scenario that my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have been warning you about. It goes to show that Donald Trump was never serious about the great litany and series of promises that he made while stump-thumping on the campaign trail all throughout that disastrous debacle and fiasco known as the 2016 presidential election cycle. You see, it is absolutely imperative that we all examine and properly vet our candidates before handing them the reins of political power. This is more of the same, more betrayal, more corruption, more of all of that nonsense which has no place in an open and honest but above all free society like that of these United States of America. And I hate to say it, no, to be honest with you, I don't hate to say it. We told you so. We told you that this was what was coming, that this would be the nightmare to unfurl within the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave, yet our damn near prophetic warnings, accurate as they have been unheeded. And we still have people out there attempting to cling to this idea that the great mafioso Trump is going to solve these problems, is going to ensure that these United States of America are brought back from this trail of degradation, decay, and dilapidation. But nothing could be further from the truth. As we continue to watch these things unfurl before the shocked and horrified eyes of the nation, we see that he is doubling down on these efforts. He keeps reaching out to work with the Democrats. And again, remember that at the height of the 2016 presidential election cycle, then presidential candidate Donald J. Trump said that it's the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party, that he didn't need conservatives, and he's clearly pointing that he had no loyalty to them whatsoever to begin with. Why have we ignored this? How has this been allowed to come to fruition? It's because we have been seduced by the notion of victory at all costs, and that is what is playing out in detrimental fashion each and every time. It is harming us as I sit here speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members. Ladies and gentlemen, we must take a step back from this. We must be ready, willing, and able to do whatever is necessary to secure the blessings of liberty, not only for ourselves, but our posterity. In other words, we have to be ready, willing, and able to secure the blessings of liberty, not only for ourselves, but also for the up-and-coming generations, and indeed those generations which have yet to be born. But are we doing that? Are we doing that when Trump continues to reach across the political aisle to make deals with the devil? No, of course not. None of that works in the best interest of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in these United States of America, we the people. And it was never designed to in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our duty, obligation, but above all responsibility, to stand up to this chicanery. But how many are truly beginning to awaken to this great monstrosity of a problem that continues to ail and afflict us at this current juncture in time? I'm not certain that all that many of those who supported Donald Trump in the presidential election cycle are willing to open their eyes to this undeniable as well as self-evident truth. Gottenheimer said, also, according to that Hill piece quoted by Federico there at Red State, that there was some discussion of the possibility that Democrats could call the bill a fix and Republicans could call it something else. You see, one of the first things that we warned you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, about, dating back to our premiere episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015, was just how dangerous the dark and twisted game of semantics really was. Remember that the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs, in his magnum opus of Keynes at Harvard back in the 1950s and 60s, attempted to warn us of these so-called terms of art that these frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist leftists would engage in. But now, it's not just the frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist leftists, it's so-called members of our own political party. Oh, they can call it something else. Oh, well, while it really achieves the same thing, while it's really the same thing, we'll call it something else. And that way, our constituents will just look at us wide-eyed, googly-eyed, and believe that we have truly done something for them, and all will be good in the world. Bovine excrement. That is certainly not how this is going to work, and that is certainly not what they had promised over the course of the past 4, at least, successive election cycles. The dishonesty and betrayal has gone to the very core of what the Republican Party is, at least of today. None of it is about our best interests. None of it is about standing up for what is right. And unfortunately, this has been The epitome of that we see rise to the surface, the message we see rise to the surface time and again ever since Donald Trump became the 45th president of these United States of America. And, ladies and gentlemen, there simply is no way of escaping this self-evident and, yes, harsh reality. Puerto Rico said, I'm not inclined to engage in a round of I told you so with this. For one thing, it's hard to know what to make of this. First of all, the only named source here is a Democrat, and the nature of what he is describing is vague. And from what we know about Donald Trump, it doesn't seem like much of a pivot. For one thing, according to Puerto Rico, he tends to have terribly consistent messages about policy issues and often puts himself on several sides of the same issue. In any event, he does not seem to have a deep-rooted philosophical opposition to using government to provide health care. Of course he doesn't. That, again, is something that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, harped on time and again. All throughout the 2016 presidential election cycle, you can peruse through our archives and see it clearly for yourselves. It's there, bright as day, clear as day. We have been consistent with respect to the warnings that we have been shouting and which, unfortunately, have gone unheeded throughout this entire course of time. Now, I wish that that wasn't the case. I wish that we had better news to say with regard to each and every little tidbit with respect to this. Unfortunately, that is not the case. What we see unfurling before the shocked and horrified eyes of the nation is the fact that the betrayal continues, and it continues unimpeded and uninhibited. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that's not going to improve our lot in life. It's not going to improve our political position. It's only going to continue to encourage those who are hell-bent on the complete and utter annihilation of these United States of America, both as a nation and people. And unfortunately, there is no signs of that getting better at any point within the foreseeable future. And why is that? The reason for that is both sides of the political aisle view the American people not as their bosses, not as those who are to wield control over them, but as expendable dupes, those rubes who can be lied to at any given and available opportunity. They thumb their noses at us instead of fearing us. And that is certainly something that we are going to have to address. It's something that we are going to have to change if we are ever to bring this nation back from the brink of ruin. Now, I fully realize that that is far easier said than done, but done it must be, and if there is anybody on the face of God's green earth who is truly capable of accomplishing and achieving that, it is the American people. But we have to be ready, willing, and able to do that. We have to be ready, willing, and able to take the steps that are necessary in order to bring that into fruition, and I'm just not so certain that we have reached that point yet. But we mustn't lose heart. We must continue to push for those things that will best serve us, both as a nation and people. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back with one last round of alcohol. Ladies and gentlemen, if she changes her position on pouring you a glass of alcohol, go ahead and push her out of the plane. You have my permission. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for tuning in to our state-of-the-art radio program here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Should you have any questions, comments, concerns, or even topic suggestions, please feel free to leave them either here in the comment section on our YouTube page or our Google Plus page or even our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us over there on Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, as well as the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. You will also find a link to the blogspot account, which is just chock full of useful information. And just as you will find in the description section of today's program, you will find a link to the Cafe Press account. Now, ladies and gentlemen, at the Cafe Press account, we have all sorts of novelty items, trinkets, and goodies, from hats, shirts, shoes, apparel, pet apparel, drinking glasses, shot glasses, mugs, thermoses, laptop sleeves and protectors, smartphone sleeves and protectors, you name it, either with our original Radio Aviation Excellence logo, or the First Class Passenger logo, or the two Uplifting America logos, one of which we start each and every show with, that one right there. Folks, with such a wide array of products and all at reasonable prices, you can't go wrong. Go ahead and take a gander at the Cafe Press account. Oh, and if you haven't already done so, please feel free to subscribe. All subscribers are welcome here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Folks, we couldn't do the show without you, and we do the show to help uplift you. We hope to see you again next time. Please do take care.